We have great reason to be very hopeful on this planet. We're in such a mind frame of scarcity so often, and that is not the case. The universe is rich. It's rich with energy and abundance. And we are working on ways to harness energy from the 0-point energy field or quantum vacuum fluctuations. This is more than lowering your electric bill. So often we put ourselves in a tight container of what we vision as possible. This is not just possible, this is happening. We are doing this. Let the imagination soar. Think about what that really means when we have unlimited energy. This alleviates almost all of the world's problems. It's the way of showing up every day. Everything we do you could call spiritual. We are made up of atoms, which are 99.9999% space. There's no separation between the material and the spiritual. It's how we live life. You need to work on yourself before you can help others. The more I work on myself, the more coherent I feel, and the easier it gets to feel into that. There's no way I could be an effective executive right now unless I had done that self-work. Where there is darkness, there is light. And let me tell you, there's so many light beings, beautiful humans that come together with their visions that are doing good on this planet.
Hello and welcome to Soul Unique. I'm Anu Peter. My goal with Soul Unique is to assist you in uncovering, nurturing, and forging your own personal spiritual path. A path that resonates intimately with who you are and with your unique signature and essence as you navigate your life on planet Earth. In this episode of Soul Unique, I'm having a conversation with my dear friend, Sarah Amne. Currently, Sarah is the CEO of a leading-edge organization called the International Space Federation, working with visionary physicist Nassim Haramein. The International Space Federation, which we'll probably refer to as ISF today, is dedicated to unifying physics, technology, and education, and to developing sustainable solutions for energy sources for our planet, as well as for solving ecological challenges. Personally, Sarah has been on a rich spiritual path of exploration and inquiry for as long as I've known her, and we'll talk about that as well. So Sarah, I want to say welcome to Soul Unique.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, it's so wonderful to see you and to have you back on this side of the Atlantic Ocean. I didn't mention that you're actually based in Switzerland right now.
Yeah, for the last few years, our headquarters are in Geneva and our laboratory is in France. That's where I'm spending the majority of my time. So it's nice to catch you. I'm back here in California.
Yeah, that's really great. What a beautiful place to be based. So let's start out with hearing about some of your work with the International Space Federation. Now, Soul Unique is not so much focused in the realms of physics and technology, but of course, those things and the work that is being done in those arenas have an important impact on the future of life on the planet. And so they impact our everyday lives, including our spiritual paths, in very direct ways. And you've mentioned to me that ISF gives hope to humanity, helping us to step out of fear and approach the future from a place of optimism. And I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, and it's a big reason why I appreciate you having me here today is not just talk about my own path, but talk about what I'm working on professionally, what we're working on at our laboratory at ISF. Because it does give great hope, and humanity needs that now. It's like we're in such a mind frame of scarcity so often, and that is not the case. The universe is rich. It's rich with energy and abundance. And, I attended Davos January of this year, and just look at the observations. I was just having fun kind of grouping the buckets of people and where I was seeing, society at, because, gosh, I don't know how many people go to Davos, probably 10, 20,000 people. It's masses. But people divide up into their different groups or different events that they attend. And of course, the World Economic Forum is a big part of that. As I was looking at the different buckets, I was seeing, once on one side of things, and this is where ISF stands and my own standpoint, is visionaries bringing in a new future for humanity, one with great hope and optimism, one where we're working on technologies, we're taking the tools that we've had, we're bringing disruptive technologies, new innovative ideas, just very, very exciting ways to move humanity. On the other side of that, more the WEF side of things, Maybe you have some people more working for special interests and fears, and that even puts it kindly in many cases. And you have everybody in between. The two main buckets I saw in between is, people that, that their eyes are open, they're waking up, they realize that maybe there is propaganda in the media, and they want to they want to do better. They want to find better ways to help humanity and the planet. But they're in fear because they don't know the way out. We hear the whole world statistics about, poverty increasing, the demise of the environment. And the other bucket you see is also people in fear, but maybe they're not quite awake yet. Maybe they're still stuck in, the matrix, stuck in the propaganda. They're not seeing, let me use my own discernment. Let me use my own awareness. And so I love talking about this because I feel like those groups in the middle that are still in fear, that, I want to say, no, we have great reason to be very hopeful on this planet because, what we're working on is just one example of many technologies out there that some incredibly brilliant and visionary people are working on. And I'm meeting many of these people now. So what we're working on in our laboratory, I may be biased, but I feel like it's one of the most important things we could be doing on this planet right now. And that is, um, new ways to harness energy. And we are working on ways to harness energy from the 0 point energy field or quantum vacuum fluctuations. And this is a subatomic level. This is not, smashing, particles against one another. It's not fusion. It's not laser technology. This is below that. This is the subatomic level, the quantum vacuum fluctuations, which is a very harmonious way to extract energy. There is an incredible amount of energy at that level, and we're finding ways to extract that into real usable power. And it's not just theoretical. So I can only say so much. Let's just say it's not just theoretical. This is happening. The other thing that we're working on in our laboratory is unified field theory, which really helps explain, theoretical research, which is kind of the roadmap, to understanding the energy production.
Wow, yeah, that's some big stuff. It's very exciting, and it's fascinating to me how it dovetails for me into my last episode of Soul Unique with visionary scientist and author Jerry Jin, where we were talking about what he calls subtle energies. And he has been talking about how the subtle energies that are, I guess, in our atmosphere, in us, in the environment, have been increasing just dramatically, just off the charts, especially just in the last 4 or 5 months since like December 2024. These subtle energies, according to Jerry, can also be referred to as chi or prana, life force energy, bioplasma, as well as other names. And I love how you said to me once before we started today that it's not subtle. This energy is not subtle. It's the field of all creation. And I'd love to know, more about 0 point energy from your and from ISF's perspective on it, as well as on, what you see as far as has there actually been an increase in this energy, and if so, how is that energy increase affecting us and the planet?
Yeah, the ancients knew about this energy source. They did. The chi, the mana, the prana, we had the names for it. And yeah, like I said before, this is anything but subtle energy. This is some of the most violent energy, violent physics on in the realm, in the universe is at that level. But we can't see it, so it's very subtle to us simply because it's at a different scale. There's space is full of energy, obviously. 5G, the radio waves, all the waves from space, it's full of energy. But if you drop down to the Planck level, so, there's the atomic level, much, much more than that. At the scale below that is the Planck level. And this is the birthplace of energy. And so when you understand the physics behind it, you understand how matter is formed, and this is one thing that our physicists are working on, is they're writing the theoretical research to understand. Let me back up a little bit. It's interesting having a front row seat to the physicists in our laboratory because as the layperson, as somebody with a business background, the physicists on this planet are brilliant. Some of the most brilliant minds are in physics. But I didn't realize that, you see equations like E equals mc squared. I didn't realize they didn't understand the mechanisms behind the constants and the forces. An example of a force would be like the gravitational force. An example of a constant would be like, C for the speed of light, for example, and E equals mc squared or alpha. Um, and they didn't know why they held the value they did. We can measure the speed of light one way or the other way, but why does it hold the value it has? And our physicists have solved for that. They have solved for unified field theory. And the first publication that came out was a little over a year ago. It's had over 70,000 downloads, so it is getting out there, and there's much more on the way. But understanding this physics has led us to the technology and understanding how to, what space-time is made of. Einstein described it as a curve, but he didn't describe what it's made up of. And now we know. And so now we understand the energy at this not so subtle level and the gravitational forces. And it's incredible. And when you realize how, the coherent structures at that level, how gravity forms, how mass emerges from that, then you realize, well, okay, that's what keeps this universe perpetually spinning. That the proton does not quit spinning. At the cosmological level, the great masses, the sun, the planets, they do not quit spinning. Where does this energy come from? In physics, it's almost like they confuse it with religion. They say, oh, there was a big bang, and now, everything is just spinning. Well, that's as good as religion. What happened behind that? Why does that happen? And now our physicists have been able to explain that. And so we've been able to explain the source of all this. And when you understand that, you understand the incredible energy that is there. When you look at, there was one physicist that made a statement that if you take the energy in a mug of water, you have enough energy to boil all the oceans on this planet. That was a gross understatement. In 1 centimeter cube of space, you have enough energy to melt all the oceans and all the planets in this galaxy and beyond. There's so much energy. It's almost an infinite amount of energy at the 0-point energy field. And there's the equations that show that. And in the universities, they don't really teach that part of the equation. They say, oh, it all kind of just balances out. So let's just ignore that part of the equation. But this was actually discovered, back in the 1920s at the time of Max Planck. They understood 0-point energy. And, for one reason or another, especially during the times of the wars, it was likely censored and it was stopped being talked about. And so now we're solving for it and we're realizing how to extract the energy, which really tells us a lot about ourselves and, that the energy that the ancients talked of, the chi, the mana, the prana, and how it forms and why it's so prevalent in our universe and in our space and our bodies.
As far as these energies, maybe access to these energies, or as my previous guest was talking about, that in his research and studies, he's seeing that it has just grown astronomically, starting 2 years ago, and then just off the charts starting last December. Is that something that ISF concurs with?
Yeah, that's measurable. That's the sun every 11 years flips its axis. And when it does that, it will let off, a lot of sun flares and so on. When it did this 11 years ago, it wasn't nearly as active as it is this flip. And it's very much there. It's measurable. There's websites. You can look up the KP index. So if you Google KP index, I do this a lot because there's some days where I'm just feeling a little bit off, maybe a little tired, but at the same time kind of jittery as if I've had too much caffeine, even though I haven't. And I'll look up the KP index. Sure enough, massive sun flare. So it's kind of nice to be aware of what the sun is doing right now, all the extra energy and radiation that's coming down. Fortunately, we just had a few major flares a few days ago, and I happened to be in the air. It's not so great for the DNA, at that level. But it is emitting, more energy onto this planet. So, from the spiritual side, can you use that energy? And absolutely. I mean, meditating with it, tuning in, feeling that rise in energy, it's absolutely something that we can, that I personally play with and just try to keep awareness of.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that with all this energy movement and increase, that it's activating everything within us. If there's darkness or negativity or arenas within ourselves or our life experience or our physical body, perhaps, it's going to activate those and bring them to the surface so they can be healed. And if we're primarily living in a place of love or compassion or, service, then those will be activated as well. And I would imagine for most of us, we have a little bit of each, or a lot of one and a little bit of the other. And so it can feel somewhat unsettling. Do you think that makes sense from your perspective as far as it activating things? And that's why, at least on the world stage, there's a lot of tumultuousness going on.
I think there's so many factors with that, that can certainly be one, the rise in frequencies, the energy, excess energy that's coming at us. That can certainly be one. There's also, the effect of a lot of people raising their consciousness, waking up, and kind of monkey effect. When some start waking up, others do too. When some start getting awareness in others, it spreads. It's in the field of humanity. And we're all connected. And physics shows that as well. It shows the entanglements that we all have with one another. So as we work on ourselves, we're helping, our lineage, we're helping those around us. We so often we reflect and mirror each other. So even just in our day-to-day dealings with each other, as we raise ourselves, we raise all those around us.
And you do that so beautifully, Sarah. You always have, as long as I've known you. Yeah.
Thank you.
So continuing on with just a little bit more about what ISF is doing, which is really exciting. I understand that ISF is working on a device to create sustainable energy for our planet. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It sounds like science fiction when I talk about it. So it does help to understand that there is grounded science behind it. There's theoretical research that's incredibly rigorous, analytical. We call it bomb-proof. These formulas are so tight, one formula leading to the other with no free parameters that explain why it is possible to do what we're doing. And so for the skeptics out there saying, that's snake oil. Read the science, read the papers, dive into it, and trust me, it's happening. And this is a handful of years away. People also think, oh, maybe this is our future generations. This is our generation. Our generation is having this happen. And the basic concept is when you create a gradient, like if you imagine a bathtub full of water and you pull the plug, well, suddenly you have where the plug was, you have less dense where the air is. And so what do the water molecules start to do? They start to spin and swirl towards that drain. They start to organize themselves coherently, creating that spin, creating that depression. You could also think of it, maybe an example would be a hurricane. A few degree temperature difference creates that great energy difference, right? That the hurricane now starts to swirl because of that gradient. And so that's basically what we're doing at the subatomic level. We're kind of, tickling that structure, and we're creating a gradient, and it's becoming almost like a fluid dynamic. You can think of space when it's organized coherently as a fluid dynamic. So almost like that bathtub water spinning. And when we're able to get it just right, you can extract energy, and it's usable energy. You can turn on light bulbs, and so one of the first products that we're working on is a sort of generator. And for a 20 kilowatt device, probably 1 meter, 1 meter, 1 meter. The exciting thing about this is it's relatively inexpensive to build. Unlike, in the news, it's a shame. There's so much attention right now being put on like Z-pinches, laser fusions, tokamaks, and these are not the answer. They are not the answer. Typically, when they say something very exciting about it, they're forgetting to include the input power.
Those are energy sources?
Yeah, it's when
or they're being posed as such?
Yeah, they're being posed as such. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. They require incredible amounts of input power. They're expensive. Multi-billions, probably trillions of dollars have been put into this, and they haven't produced a single usable watt. As opposed to what we're doing, harnessing energy from the quantum vacuum field, very inexpensive, no rare earth minerals, or maybe a little bit in the magnets, but it's basically coils, it's electronic parts, it's very feasible. And so that's an example of a build for a static device, like a static generator. Scalable, stackable is going to allow somebody to decentralize power, let go of power grids, power right at their home, or traveling with them, working on the future, working on plasma devices as well. And the beauty of these devices, people say, well, is it safe? And better than that, it's actually incredibly healthy for the body and the biological system. So the third category of technology that we're working on is BioTech, for longevity. And because when, I explained that fluid dynamic, that coherent spin at the Planck level, when we're in a coherent space, now our mitochondria is spinning actively, producing our ATP, which feeds our body, which keeps our DNA healthy. And so now we have a pathway to longevity as well.
Incredible. You're doing some exciting stuff. No wonder you moved to Switzerland to be a bigger part of this. So that is a perfect segue to talk about ARC technology, otherwise known as Advanced Resonance Kinetics, ARK. Can you tell us more about ARC technology? And this is something that comes out of ISF.
It is. This is a technology that we have on the market now. Actually, I'm wearing one. It's this little crystal. And, I almost hate to say crystal because people think, oh, woo-woo. They think it's like kind of like new agey crystal. Not that crystals aren't fabulous in themselves, but the reason why there's a crystal is because it's quartz. And quartz has a piezoelectric effect. It's made of silicon dioxide, which means it can take one form of energy and transfer it into another. And so what this is actually discovered accidentally by our research director, Nassim Haramein. He was working on the gravitational plasma energy device, and he noticed that the houseplants in the area it was turning into a jungle. They were growing like crazy. The lawn outside was green. Beyond that, it was brown. Like the plants were just thriving. And he realized how healthy this field was for biological systems. And he thought, well, this is a way to harness that power. And so what we do is there's a Faraday cage. This device that modulates these crystals is in a Faraday cage. And so we put them in for a few hours, leave them in overnight, take them next morning. And what they have done in that amount of time, if they have coupled with the field of this larger device, and now they're creating their own little toroidal coherent field. And so when I wear this, it's structuring the water molecules in my body, which when that happens, the cells now can form barriers around, or the water molecules can form barriers around the cells, better for the energy transmission in the body, better for this communication from the cells to the brain. And so I wear one of these, and people just had tremendous results with those. I also have one in my water bottle. So I'm drinking structured water
there's
as well.
in the bottom of your water
one
bottle.
you can stick it in. Sometimes people move in between their pendant and their water bottle. So yeah, it's a neat little piece of technology that's on the market now that's creating that coherent field that I was talking about. And so that's what I was saying. The energy devices to produce our power are not just, amazing in that they produce an infinite amount of power no matter where you need it for free once you buy the device, but they also produce this amazing coherent field around our body.
Beautiful. So would you say, keeping in mind the goal of So Unique, right? Would you say that ARC technology can somehow be used to enhance our spiritual paths, or perhaps assist us on our paths of personal transformation?
We need to take care of our bodies. It's all we have while we're on this planet, right?
Yeah.
And so anything to help the body be healthier, move, work more coherently, with, resonance, absolutely, that's going to help our path. And, I don't really separate spiritual path from life path. It's all one and the same. So anything we can do to improve our lives now, it's absolutely going to help. And I know, a lot of people that work with energy, they use these as a practitioner, on spots in the body, put it on the temples, on the chakra points. And so, yeah, these can absolutely be used for healing purposes or to wear day to day. We make structures of them where you can actually have it in your home to make the whole space coherent. So you're not wearing it necessarily, but anybody in your space will have that effect.
Yeah. And, so much about personal transformation, experience and research. And it's also making me think of somatics, like, what is it? Peter Levine's work with somatic experiencing, but that whole realm of somatics with the idea that our personal imprints of memory, whether it be trauma or things that have happened to us, that we actually store them in the physical tissue of our body, and I've seen that in some of my experiences, both for myself as well as working with others. So, and that can affect our physical health, right? So I would imagine that these could assist with that process as well.
Yeah, and that's really a deep dive into epigenetics and where do we store memories. We don't store memories in our mind, they are recorded on the network of space-time. We have, Nissim does a great job of explaining this when he's solving what is called the hard problem of physics, which is consciousness, which actually is not so hard once you understand the physics that he is working on. But, he used the example, like if I'm to hold this up, you have one perspective of it, I have another. So all of us as unique individuals are imprinting onto, the space-time network, space memory, he likes to call it. And so our wounds, the pains from our past ancestors, those are imprints of the network. And that's in our epigenetics. And we can change this through all kinds of healing modalities. I mean, this is what counselors do if they're doing a good job when they take you back to like a childhood trauma, for example, and have you maybe see it with another perspective. Well, that's what you're doing. You're changing the imprint on space-time. You can actually explain this with physics. And so, when we're working on ourselves, we're changing the way we can view it. We're healing behind it. And so now suddenly, well, the epigenetics are changing. And that's how we're changing it for our family as well and for our lineage. And so, being in a more coherent space, whether it's with this technology or any kind of healing modality or practice, that's what we're doing. We're changing who we are, and which is very, very doable.
Yeah, I love that. So it really feels to me and sounds like that the arc crystals could assist in that process. They can assist with the process of sort of morphing the epigenetics, which is in our physical body, right? But it's also energetic.
It's all energetic.
It's
Yeah,
all
it's
energetic.
all
Okay.
energetic. I mean, it has the physical effect. By the time it's had the physical effect, it's because the energetic imprint is there,
Right.
right? For
Okay.
everything that makes us who we are with our mannerisms, even down to the culture we're used to living in. So when we're in like the more calm centered space, we're able to go in and this technology does help get us to that calm space because it's a coherent field. We're not being bombarded with all kinds of 5G or EMF or our own chaotic thoughts. So it does help bring a calm center, which helps us access that point.
Beautiful. Well, let's talk a little bit about Nassim Haramein, who you have mentioned, who is sort of the central figure of ISF. Is that correct to say that?
Yeah. He's been, at this research and development for about 35 years. And the way he got there is he, thank goodness, is autodidact, means self-studied. He didn't go the traditional university route. He has probably studied far, far, far more physics than they require in most universities. And this is a good thing because he studied the whole range of physics, which is how he was finally able to unify it. He was able to understand, from the cosmos to the quantum and the founding fathers back to Max Planck and Einstein and Faraday and Heaviside, many of whom are also autodidact. And so he has written the physics, and he's the director of the technology in our laboratory as well. And another way he was able to get there is when he was studying physics, he was also in nature, observing nature, observing what happens when you drop like a pebble off a bridge and you watch the ripples in the water or the spiral in a seashell or, the fractal nature of a leaf in a tree. And, nature is there telling about us ourselves. They're telling us how the universe is made. Studying physics in great depth, he's able to write the math, write the formulas behind it. And so I think what so many of us might see in altered states in meditation or, whatever practice we may have, he has been able to ground it by writing the physics behind it as well.
Cool. Yeah. And I love what I read about a tour that you were doing with the ISF and with Nassim last year called the Nature of Reality Tour. And I wanted to read a quote here from what I found on the page on the ISF website that talks about the Nature of Reality Tour, which is very inspiring. It says, imagine a world where our energy needs are met sustainably and humanity thrives in harmony with nature. A world where we have unlocked the secrets of the quantum realms, enabling us to harness energy from the zero-point energy field, control gravity, and have access to nearly infinite resources. Wow, that's a very bold claim, and quite frankly, it's a beautiful vision. And we've touched on some of these points here with zero-point energy, the quantum realms. I don't think we've talked about controlling gravity. So, and, I want to take this and, of course, apply it to how does it apply to people on their own spiritual path to people, in their everyday lives. And it seems like that's sort of the goal of the Nature of Reality tour, to take the work that ISF is doing and make it more accessible and sort of include people in what you're doing. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the nature
Yeah,
of
yeah.
reality.
This was, a talk we did last year based on the paper that was published in September of 2023, um, which is talking about the emergence of mass and gravity and where it comes from, and so it's walking people through the physics, so it grounds it for them, but it's also very inspiring because when I'm talking about harnessing energy from quantum vacuum fluctuations. This is more than lowering your electric bill. So often people we put ourselves in a tight container of what we vision as possible. And what I'm trying to do, and this is why it's so nice to be here on your podcast as well, not just to talk to you and talk to everybody, but help everyone expand their mind by letting them know that this is very possible. Not just possible, this is happening. We are doing this. And when you really drop into that, let the imagination soar. Think about what that really means when we have unlimited energy. This alleviates almost all of the world's problems. When you think about poverty from lack of resources, whether it's food or water or energy or goods, or whether it's from wars, this is all solved when you have unlimited energy. Think about just water, for example. Well, now you can pump water great distances. You can extract it from the atmosphere, which is usually very energy intensive. Desalinization, which is energy intensive. So now you have water to greenify where you are to grow the food. And with gravity control, which also sounds, I know, very far fetched from people, but when you understand the mechanisms behind the force of gravity, which our physicists do, you understand how to curve and control space-time, then you understand it's actually, I don't want to say pretty simple because, that puts the Sims 35 years of research lightly, and it's anything but it's almost like a helicopter spinning fast. It's creating a depression, right? And creating lift. Well, now we're doing that at the atomic level. We're creating lift, which also means we don't feel the G forces. And I feel a year ago I would have been very hesitant to have this conversation with you. But there's so many whistleblowers around the UAPs now. Governments and mainstream organizations are talking about UAPs and this technology,
What are UAPs?
unidentified aerial phenomena. They used to go
Oh,
by the
okay.
name of UFO.
Okay.
So UFO, whatever you want to call them, crafts that are not from this planet.
Uh-huh.
There's so much now in the media. There's so many whistleblowers coming out talking about crash recovery from the governments and so on. Well, these technologies obviously use a physics that we do not currently have on this planet. They're not using rocketry. They don't get here with rocketry. They get here with the kind of energy and gravity control that I'm talking about. And so when people understand that, like, well, yes, of course it's feasible then. It makes it more real for all of those who have had an experience seeing something in the sky that they couldn't quite understand. And so it is the time to be talking about it. But yes, it does emerge from this physics, and it is happening. And this is not too far away.
You also mentioned to me that Nassim and the ISF are doing theoretical research in the realms of exploring and explaining who we are, how we're made, and what consciousness is. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that. There's a big conversation, I think, going around about, where consciousness originates
Mm-hmm.
from. And it
Mm-hmm.
seems to be going back and forth over the years. But
Yeah, he's actually writing a biophysics paper right now, which is fascinating. It's not published yet, so I can't talk too much about it. It's going to be published before July, and the reason why is because he's going to be presenting it at a conference in Barcelona in July. This conference is also attended by Roger Penrose, who has been working on consciousness, Stuart Hameroff from University of Arizona, who's helping to organize this conference, Federico Fagin, and many others who have been working on consciousness are going to be there. And Nassim is going to be presenting his paper. And this paper is fascinating because one way that he has unified physics and understood the nature of reality is he's understood the scaling law from the quantum to the cosmos, how the universe scales itself, which is how he is able to understand the sub-Planck level, which is the scale much smaller than the Planck. And So applying that same scaling, he understands that level, which is how the universe communicates with itself and gives itself feedback. And he can apply the same scaling to the biological system, explaining how biology emerges from the zero-point energy field. And, for example, from the zero-point energy field to the neurons in the brain, there's about 8 scales. And applying the mathematical formulas that he does for the universe, it emerges perfectly with the human body. And of course it would, because we are part of the universe. And so when you start understanding this and you start understanding the feedback of the universe and how the universe has its refresh rate and how it's constantly informing itself, just as we are as a part of this universe, then the consciousness doesn't become such a hard problem. And he actually has been able to solve it mathematically.
Yeah, you mentioned Federico Fagin, who's quite a fascinating man who I met a few years ago at a dinner party. And he recently wrote a book about shifting the paradigm and the thinking around consciousness, that saying that it does not originate in the brain, that it has existed before the body and outside of the body. And I'm assuming maybe you don't want to talk about that because Nassim's paper hasn't come out yet, but I'm assuming that maybe that reflects some of what Federico is touching into.
Yeah, and they've actually had a couple conversations together recently diving into this. It's neat to hear them have a conversation. And yeah, when you look at like the neural network of the brain, it's almost like a fractal of like the mega clusters, the galaxies. You see those same networks.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, this is wonderful to be learning what you're involved with and the work that you're doing and the work that ISF is doing. So I'd love for the Soul Unique audience to know a bit more about you and your path, which quite frankly is very inspiring and full of lots of gold nuggets. You've now dedicated your path to helping humanity evolve and to helping the planet through your work with ISF. And it takes quite a journey to fully step into an empowered, clear-minded place of integrity in being of service to others. Can you tell us about that path and how it unfolded for you personally?
For me, there's no separation behind spiritual path and life. Everybody on this planet is in the same boat of getting feedback, of having an action, having feedback. To me, it breaks down to what is our attention? Where is our awareness? Where do we want to go? And for me, my intention, has been very strong. I think from a young child, very motivated in certain directions. And for me, it's like intuition is nothing magical. Is where's my motivation? Where am I excited to go? And what is my intention? You combine it all together and it's just like a natural path emerges. And so, when I was young, I was naturally drawn into business. Making little businesses even when I was a little kid. My intention, was always, I was very, very passionate about the environment, helping animals. So I dreamed when I was young of, I grew up in Northern California where the redwood trees are, and I would see the timber mills and processing the trees, and it would upset me so much. Granted, I understand we need wood for building, but especially when it came to the old growth forests. And my dream was that, to buy the mills and turn them into, at the time, I was probably like 12 or 13, solar car plants, something technology that was going to help the future. And I couldn't put a label on. I just felt like I wanted to be involved with technology to help the future. And, fast forward to, I was probably in my 20s. I was meditating. I was just reading about drowning polar bears or something that was just breaking my heart. And my meditation was, how do I help the animals? And I just got very, very strong downloads of technology. Actually, very similar to that technology we're working on in our laboratory, but it's like I could see it and feel it, and nothing lit a fire in me so much as, bringing technology to help the planet. And I didn't know what that would look like, but it was in me, that fire was in me. And so, almost every day I would just have the intention, let me be in the highest level of service that's available to me. It's kind of just day by day. Let me be in the highest level of service. Okay, well, for a while that meant self-work, and I got a very strong message, just chill. You don't need to like be a practitioner or anything right now. I know you want to help people. This is like me talking to me. You need to work on yourself before you can help others. And so that really led me into a path of self-observation, where are my wounds? Where is my lineage, having certain habits that, okay, wake up. Do we need to do it this way? Can we do it another way? Can we grow? So a lot of self-observation, but continuously following the path, but not really knowing what the future would look like, but always holding the strong intention just to be in the highest level of service. And holding the intention that I was open to change. I think also I mentioned, we're so apt to put ourselves in containers, but we're also, in general, as humanity, afraid of change. But sometimes to course correct, you need to be open to that. And I think, telling myself that every morning, I'm open to change. I'm open to whatever it takes to put me on the best path to be in the highest level of service. That helped me keep that position, that clear path, even though I didn't know quite what it would look like. I just trusted it would naturally emerge.
And you're talking about change both in your outside surrounding world as well as internal, like personal change in your personal sort of trajectory.
Absolutely. So I'm open to changing who I am and how I operate and how I communicate. I'm open to life changes. Do I need to move? Do I need to shift what I'm doing for my career? Do I need to take a class? Like, what do I need to do next? Like, let me, and, for me, it was a matter of following my enthusiasm to figure out what that might win. And sometimes it's like, why am I doing this? Why am I on this board or working with these businesses or, doing this or that? And now it's like, okay, now I could see how all the dots connected to get me to where I am today. So having that level of trust.
Yeah, I love that. And just following that point of enthusiasm, I like that sort of inner knowing, that sense of inner knowing, like maybe the mind can't make sense of why something feels like you're being pulled in a certain direction with that inner knowing and inner enthusiasm. But if you're willing to follow that, who knows where it's going to go,
Right. It's an inner compass.
Yeah. But I also would like to touch in more, especially for our listeners, like when you're sort of putting that intention out there, do you feel like you're receiving guidance from like higher self or inner self, or you're only following like that personal sort of trajectory of enthusiasm and inner knowing?
We're working on all the different forms of intuition, no matter how it comes. Is it a knowing? Is it a feeling? What kind of sensing? And the more I work on myself, the more coherent I feel and the easier it gets to feel into that. But going through the process is like, is this in my mind? Is this coming from a wounded place or is this coming from a guided place? Questioning myself. And so, yeah, it's easy to say, oh, trust yourself. But what does that mean? Where is this feeling coming from? Is this feeling coming from a healthy place or from a wounded place? And so learning to navigate that is not clear. It's not. And I stumbled plenty. Oh, trust me, I've stumbled plenty. I got off course, but always keeping that endpoint in mind, always keeping that clear intention. So, if the course was straight, yeah, it might look like this, but you're coming back to it.
And for people listening, that was a very wobbly course.
Wobbly line over a straight line.
Yes. No, I love that. And it's so insightful because I think that's a lot of people have that challenge with, well, which direction do I go? Which sort of voice do I listen to? And it's not really cut and dry and all that clear. It's just a matter of continuing forward with what your sort of intent is. And maybe there's a sense of guided or being guided for some people, whether that comes internally or a sense of it coming like externally from guidance. But just keeping on the path and knowing that you will be steered in the right direction ultimately. It may not happen all at once. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. And for me, realizing where I'm strong, like for me, my body talks to me. Like, how do I feel? How do I feel in my heart, in my gut? Does that excite me? Do I feel perked up? Do I feel like it brings my energy down? So really tapping into where I'm strong and sensing, and also knowing they say it's an easy one, but I find it kind of difficult because like, oh, where's that knowing, so-called knowing coming from?
Yeah.
Again, is it the wounded place or the healthy place? But, and as I notice I strengthen those, well, now the others ones are strengthening. Okay, now let me get the visuals, the other senses of the feedback. And it just becomes easier and easier, I find for myself. But it's been a long path of exploration for sure, and healing and working on myself and self-observation to okay, well, I know, so I'm reacting this way, or maybe I have this codependency in a relationship, or what it might be. So plenty of self-work. Absolutely.
Beautiful. I mean, it's so easy to get sort of stuck in the mind where the mind like wants everything to be figured out now and everything to be clear and easy. But
Yeah.
that's not really what our path is in so many cases. And so it's just trusting in the
Right,
path.
and I noticed that too, like, it integrates. There's no separation between personal and business, it's all one, it's all entangled, it's all reflections, it's all mirroring ourselves. So even as the CEO, well, in the past as, an executive, I might do the 5-year pro forma, I see the target, and I'm gonna plow there no matter what. And, the new way of managing is, okay, I know the end goal, in case of ISF, I know where we wanna be. I don't know how to get there, and taking it step by step and feeling my way. So even in business, it's a practice of self-discovery and honing in those personal skills. And now I can see why, my higher wiser self was so strongly advocating me to work on myself before I could help others, because there is no way I could be an effective executive right now unless I had done that self-work and was able to feel the way through business as well.
I love that. So that's just sort of my vision for Soul Unique. When I first started out, I was just like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know that this is what I want to be doing and where I want to be going. And I know essentially what my end goal is. I'm still not sure how I'm going to get there. So let's back up a little bit. You touched on childhood a little bit earlier. And I'm curious, were there early spiritual influences in your life, or, what I'm calling spiritual? And I also would like to say that I love how you said, spiritual is not separate from life, or spiritual path is not separate from life path. It's all the same thing. And it's, some people I think turn away when they hear the term spiritual, and I totally get that. And one of the reasons I use that term with Soul Unique is so it identifies sort of what I'm up to with the Soul Unique podcast. And spiritual, I also recognize that spiritual means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But anyway, back to you. Were there early spiritual influences in your life? And you know what I mean when I
I
say
do. Yes, I
spiritual.
totally understand. That's yes. I grew up with a father who was very academic, encouraging me to open my options by doing the best I could at school and getting into the best university, which I'm thankful for, because I did go to a very big, good business school, top-rated business school, which has opened a lot of doors and helped me on my path. And a mother who was, amazing and more nurturing. And, when I was 8 years old, she learned muscle testing. So I would do muscle testing from a young age, which helped me understand, okay, maybe the body has more wisdom in it than my conscious mind can comprehend. So that was a great teaching early on. But one thing that even my mom admits to me now is she didn't understand thinking from the heart. Even though she was very guided and loved nature and beauty, and was, attracted to the muscle testing, which we were learning, and, what were called more spiritual books and lineage, it's still, she didn't teach to follow from the heart, because she didn't know herself. We didn't have these terms on it. So I'm 47 now. And I think it's a lot easier now for the younger generations. It's much more talked about. But when I was young, it wasn't really talked about. There weren't these kind of discussions. And so, I had an imaginary friend when I was young. I called her Katie. Well, that's all my parents thought, is she was imaginary. Well, maybe I did have the seeing capabilities, and maybe they were shut down because it wasn't encouraged, or it was called imaginary. I think right now we have much more awareness with how to raise our kids and encourage them to hone into these intuitive abilities, which we have naturally as children. So I didn't have that. So I did have to learn. I went through a very traditional academic route, and into traditional jobs, working for large corporations with, Paramount Pictures, Apple Computer, very traditional. And I didn't know to do that. Like I said, like, okay, let's make that pro forma and follow it. I didn't have the training. And so I did have to learn that later in life. But I am very appreciative, to my mother and my father for the different aspects of how we can be in this world. That was incredibly helpful. And as a child too, I was so attracted, like, every time I blew out my birthday candles, I'd wish to be magic. Like I just knew. I don't think you're supposed to disclose your wish, but I just did. But hey, it got me here. I think it's still my wish every year, whatever that means. Um, but I just knew there was something else there. I
It's
knew.
working. I tell you, it's working.
I just knew we were capable of so much more. And maybe that's, the child in me is so much of us. We just know we're capable of so much more. And I remember being frustrated that, I would tell my parents, this sounds ridiculous, but I know I could lift our house. Maybe I was remembering back to the ancient technologies and when we built the temples. But like, I just knew we could do more. So I remember being frustrated as a child for sure.
Oh, I love that. And yes, the magic of blowing out those candles and having that wish has certainly come true and I think, continues to do so. Again, I'm coming back to using the term spiritual, but you know what I mean, and I think our listeners do. It doesn't necessarily have any religious connotations to it. But if you were to describe your current spiritual perspective in your life today, how would you describe it?
And I think anybody will say the same thing. Getting to that point of stillness, what's that saying? Move slower to move faster. And so I could find myself, I work so hard. We need to hire so many more people at ISF than we have. And so I'm just wearing way too many hats. So not only managing things at the higher levels, but also just, doing the doing of the day to day as well. And so after a long, exhausting day, it's so easy, to forget to find that still place. But I notice when I just meditate, when I take still moments of a beautiful, altar with things that are special to me at home, just sitting in front of that, finding my still place. And it doesn't necessarily mean still mind. It could mean contemplation, which also often leads me to insights about where to go for my personal life or for the business or, the mission, as I like to call it at ISF. It's a mission. It's not your regular company. That's where I really get the insights. Being in nature, I live in the French Alps right now near Mont Blanc, and those mountains are just magical. They have a very high crystalline content, and so the energy there is just, it feels so good. So getting in nature on the weekends is very grounding and healing for me, especially after being in the office and behind the computer all week. But it's a challenge finding. I'm constantly trying to find more balance in my life because that's so important as a practice, is to balance. And I've been neglecting my own self-work, and so I'm trying to get back into that, take some time to proactively work on myself in a way that I know I need a little more help. And reading books and trying to grow as much as I can. But I would say that the key point is definitely finding that still place, and that's where someone we can hear, our higher knowledge, our higher wisdom, gain the insights, and move forward in a more clear path.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Just always finding time to come, even if it's just a few minutes, come back to that still place and keep that alive. So if you were to give advice to someone seeking a deeper connection with themselves and perhaps with all that is, what would that be?
Keeping your intentions, but not being stuck on the path on how to get there. Agility is so important. I mentioned earlier being open to change. And I think that is so critical, just agility in the way you see your life. Like, don't be stuck on a path. I mentioned this, I do this for the business, I do this for personal. I know the end goal. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'm clear on my intention for my personal growth, for my mission in the world. I'm very clear on that. I can almost meditate and feel what it feels like, but then I let it go. I don't know how I'm going to get there. It's like, on stepping stones. What's the next step? You don't know where the next log, next rock to hop on. You don't know. You want to get to the other side of the river. You don't know what steps you're going to take to get there, for example. So I would say the best advice I can give is just flexibility, whatever that's going to take. So maybe the motivation leads you to take a course or to do a self-improvement workshop in one area or another, whatever that may look like, to get into a relationship with somebody, to drop a relationship with somebody, whatever that agility means, following the heart.
I love that. And that brings me to my next question, really, which is about how can somebody build a spiritual practice that evolves with them over time? And you've already started touching on that. But I think it really comes back to that inner sort of sense of stillness, center.
Yeah, I think it's a way of being in this world. And again, it's not the separation of spiritual from life. It's the way of showing up every day. Everything we do, you could call spiritual. Everything. Even if you're behind the computer thinking of how to write an email to your boss, everything. It's all entwined. It's all the same. We are, made up of atoms, which are, 99.9999% space. There's no separation between the material and, what you're calling the spiritual. It's how we live life. And so always being mindful and aware and self-observing and keeping that intention. And I notice the more I do that, the easier it gets because coherency propagates. And, not being afraid to, I notice, some people dropping out of my life, new people dropping in. And there's magic in the world right now. When at the start of this conversation, I used the example of how I went to Davos. It was pure magic. That the people that was meeting there were like pieces of the puzzle for the mission that I'm working on, from big parts of maybe including financing to the small little detail of somebody that could do new designs for ARC or, whatever it may be, to people that can help with licensing partners or whatever. Like the perfect people were coming in. It's like when you find your coherence, you're naturally attracting others of that coherence. It's the power of resonance. And, so not letting things pull you down that aren't resonant with your future and where you want to go. And the more you can let that go and shift into the coherent, resonant state that you want to be in, it almost magnifies itself exponentially because now I'm connected to all these other beautiful resonant souls that are working on these amazing things. And they're introducing me to others, who are introducing me to others. It's like if you imagine like the flower of life, just like, magnifying on itself. It's just life just becomes beautiful like that. And I just came from an event with other visionaries, before that I was with another event with the visionaries. I've been at a few this year. And the few times I've been able to get out of the laboratory, it's hard to get out. But when I get out, it's like just magic happens being around these beautiful beings that are working magic on this planet. And so it's the way to live life, I would say. Just following your heart, following others that you resonate with, letting go of things that feel just like obligations, letting go of the shoulds.
Can you just touch briefly, what is Davos for those that don't know?
Davos is a little village in Switzerland that the whole world comes upon on once a year for the World Economic Forum. And I know many people cringe when they hear about the World Economic Forum or WEF, but where there is darkness, there is light. And let me tell you, there's so many light beings, beautiful humans that come together with their visions that are doing good on this planet that also come together at that time. And so going to an event like that, it's a great opportunity to meet others who are also doing good on this planet and sharing ideas and collaborating. Like the key word we kept sharing with each other is collaboration, collaboration. We've got to do this together. Like at ISF, we're a small team, we need others to work with as well and come together. And it happens. That's another intention I have. We talked about intentions. That's another one of my intentions is may the perfect people and resources come my way. Let me be the flower, let them come to me. And I find I'm naturally at these events and the perfect people come along and I come along for them. We meet each other.
That reminds me of what you mentioned on the phone recently, where the flower and the bee. Can you just touch on that briefly? Because I think that, that could be considered sort of spiritual guidance or
it's
life guidance.
It's a magnetism.
Yeah.
Who are we attracting for our magnetism?
Mm-hmm.
This could actually be explained with quantum physics as well. What is our resonance? Who are we calling in? And so we can go up there. It's almost like the more feminine versus masculine way of operating. It doesn't mean if you're a man or a woman. It's just what the energy is. So the female energy is very magnetizing. So instead of the bee, which hops from flower to flower, that goes out and does the doing, let me sit. It doesn't mean don't do a lot of doing. Oh, I'm planting a lot of seeds. I'm working really hard. But let me make it more effortless. Let me catch that wave and let it take me.
Okay, so here's a fun question. What's your all-time favorite spiritually oriented and inspiring book, or maybe 2 or 3 books?
Again, separating spiritual from life. What is spiritual? What is life? And so, okay, yes, I have Siddhartha, which I wanted to reread on my nightstand right now, which was greatly inspiring and reminded me of that still point that I was talking about earlier. But I also have by Dr. David Rock called Your Brain at Work. Because having my brain operate, understanding leadership skills and operating environment, oh, that's spiritual for sure. Learning how to work with others. So, what's the separation? And so, and then also my time is so limited after working so hard. I find myself not just reading, but during my commute, listening to podcasts or YouTubes with relationships, whether it's with others or personal self-improvement, getting a lot of inspiration. So I'm not answering your question very well. So you said
That's
of all
okay.
times,
No, it's all good
but
stuff.
I'm just
Good
I hop.
resources.
I hop all over between self-development, business development, what we call spiritual development, ones that help me self-observe. I'm really I bounce around a lot, and it's so hard to keep a favorite, but I have a lot of fun too with, you know, um, things like the gene keys. Oh, let me open a page and see if there's a message for me. Let me pick a tarot card and see if there's a message for me, which sounds woo-woo, but it's actually can be very guided and inspirational as well. If I want to hear a
Absolutely.
fresh thought and I don't want it to come from my mind, I just want to maybe have a fresh thought in my mind. So I'll have fun with those kind of things as well.
I love that. Thank you. Well, maybe I'll just fine tune that question a little bit. Like, if you go back, I don't know, 20, 25 years or so when you were, earlier on your path, was there a book that like sort of opened your eyes? It could be any realm of book or was inspiring for you or opened your mind.
Actually, probably the book that led to us meeting.
Really?
Yes. I remember I was just maybe starting to wake up. And when I say wake up, I just mean expanding my awareness, questioning who I am, what it all is. And I was at a bookstore and this book caught my eye called like Astral Travel for Beginners. And I was like, I don't know, I was just like drawn to this book. I'm like, there's so much more out there. There's so much that my eyes aren't able to see. And, maybe I was doing it passively in dreams, lucid dreaming, little things, but I didn't have a label for it. Maybe it shouldn't even have a label. But anyway, this book attracted me, which led me into how we met was through that workshop, which teaches out of body experiences and working with your own energy system. And maybe I was drawn to that because one thing that workshop did for us was it taught us how to clear our energies by running our energies, feeling where the blocks might be, which was the start of my path to energy work and healing and raising my awareness in that way. So, was it that book necessarily that attracted me, or was it the path that it led me on? And here we are today, actually, thanks to that book as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now with the intent of assisting those on their spiritual path, wherever they may be, or their life path, are there any red flags that you might like to share with us that people should be aware of when exploring different spiritual paths, life paths, communities, teachings, or teachers? Because I think there can be, as we've said, keep your eye on the goal and you'll be led in the right direction ultimately. But there can also be some sway on that path, some left and some right and some up and some down. And it's nice to be able to have a sense of knowing, as far as knowing that you're going to be if you're going to choose to work with a teacher, how would you, sort of evaluate that teacher's credentials or.
Yeah, the great question. I would say I've always personally been very careful of anything with a dogma or a guru. If a guru as a teacher, beautiful. Maybe you can learn from that person. If they're putting themselves between you and oneness or this field that you're trying to explore, if you have to go through them to get to that, well, that's definitely a red flag for me.
Mm-mm.
If there's a dogma, it's like, okay, is there an alternative motivation for control and power here? That's often what that tells me personally. And so I would say those would be two red flags. Absolutely. Sometimes the herd mentality you can get caught up in. And it's like, okay, no, am I really listening to myself and my own guidance? Let me step back from this. Or maybe that group was okay for me for a little while. Let me reanalyze. Constantly reanalyzing, just like I talked about earlier. Maybe certain people in your life drop away. Well, maybe certain groups drop away that helped you at one point, but aren't anymore. And so constantly reanalyzing where you're getting that guidance, where is it coming from? And that's one reason why I especially love the physics that our physicists are writing on now, because it's free of dogma. It's a very clear explanation to how the universe works, and it's beautiful when people are listening to it because you can see it just striking truth. Even if they don't understand the formulas, like, oh, the universe actually does work in this beautiful, clear way. There's no reason for dogmas and the so many religions. There's beauty behind them, but there might be a layer of control over them that when people can see through that or feel through that for themselves to the pure intent behind it it's just like, this fresh air comes in, this fresh breath.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's so important to just be aware of every step of the way and constantly, as you said, checking back in with yourself. So lastly, I would like to ask, what's a simple but powerful shift someone could make today to feel more spiritually aligned, or perhaps just in alignment with their own sort of inner navigator or their inner compass?
Yeah, great question. Just, if you don't do it already, meditate.
Mm.
It's so clear, it's so easy. Even if you just take a few minutes, just meditate and just see what inspires you, see what comes in. Go in with clear mind, clear expectations. It's just going to happen like that. Thoughts might come in that totally shift trajectory. Um, Time in nature, meditating in nature. That's my golden pill.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. This has been really inspiring and wonderful to talk with you and to reconnect with you. So if you would like more information about Sarah's work and the work of the International Space Federation, visit SpaceFed, that's SPACEFED.com, and the ARC crystals are at arccrystals.com. And I also want to throw this in there that ISF also has a monthly live session with their physicists where the public can ask questions. And these sessions are called Think Beyond. Is that correct?
That's right.
And you'll find them on the events tab at spacefed.com. So again, thank you so much, Sarah, for being here. It's wonderful to connect with you and hear your wisdom and where you are in the world right now on your path and all the exciting things that ISF and you and Nassim are doing and bringing to our world.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to be here and to seeing you again after so long.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
What an inspiring conversation with Sarah. I'm so grateful for her joining me today. There's a lot to absorb and take in. I hope you'll find it helpful as you navigate your own journey. As always, it is my intention to make the resources that were mentioned in today's podcast as easy as possible for you to track down. I'll be posting as many as possible of the books, concepts, and methodologies that were mentioned in our conversation on the soulunique.com website, so you can track them down and check them out if you'd like. It's my intent as the Soul Unique podcast continues to grow and expand to turn the soulunique.com website into a rich library of useful and inspiring information and resources that can help assist you in uncovering, forging, and navigating your own personal spiritual path. If you'd like to join me on this journey, I encourage you to sign up for the Soul Unique mailing list at soulunique.com, and I'll keep you up to date on new episodes, inspiration for your unfolding path, and other resources. Lastly, I'd just like to add a quick plug here that if you appreciated and resonated with this episode, I will be forever grateful and honored if you would please like, follow, and maybe even write a short comment about the episode on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. It will help tremendously in spreading the good vibes about forging a personal spiritual path, as well about this new and continually evolving podcast. Thank you for your consideration, and thank you for listening today. I hope you'll continue to tune in to the Soul Unique podcast in the future, and I'm wishing you well and sending you highest vibes as you continue to navigate your life, and yes, perhaps even your own personal spiritual path. Thank you for being here.